How does a professional British cycling team go from barely winning races for 45 years to winning multiple Tour de France's and earning 16 Olympic gold medals in a span of just a few years? Enter the marginal gains theory, or otherwise known as the 1% principle. What does this theory entail, and how can you apply this principle to your life? In this video, I will go over all of that and leave you with 5 takeaways on how to actually apply this principle. Hey, I'm Ivana. Welcome to my channel where I talk about how to apply the science of habits to design the life that you want. If you need some help figuring out how to be more actionable with change, you're in the right place. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok if you want to digest this material in different ways, or if you just want to see more of me, you can follow me on there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and comment on this video, and let's dive in. Whenever someone who is successful in their field is interviewed about the path they took to get to where they are, they're always asked the question that sounds very similar to this. What is the one thing that you attribute your success to? This kind of a question leaves you with this idea that there was a one event, one choice, one, maybe 2 things that they had focused on that had made all the difference. But it's never just one single thing. It's usually a collection of many very small things which have contributed to this overall success. And if you have been in pursuit of bettering yourself in some kind of way, you have probably stumbled upon this graph, the 1% principle graph, or better put, the trajectory of your life if you make all the right moves, bettering yourself 1% at a time. It's kind of crazy, but it's kind of simple all at the same time. It sounds so doable, like make yourself 1% better. That's nothing, and over the time you reap these benefits of transforming yourself in unimaginable ways. Who wouldn't be down for that? Armed with excitement to get started, only to find out when it came time to applying it, you kind of didn't know what to do with it. Probably also filled with questions like, I know my math isn't the best, but if I'm 1% better every day for a whole year, how am I only 37% better at the end of the year? How is it not 365? Why is no one else questioning this math? Am I the only one that's not getting this? And how do I even know what 1% looks like? What does it mean? What does all of it mean? In order to understand how to even apply this principle, we first have to know where it came from and what it actually is. The 1% principle means breaking apart every aspect of the process and improving each by 1% or some other really small fraction, which leads to bigger outcomes than any of those changes on their own. In other words, an improvement on its own could be almost unnoticeable, but when repeated and stacked with other small improvements, the results are multiple folds bigger. It's the small change that's compounded over time. And the further away we're going from the start, the bigger the growth will be, hence the upward curve on the graph. It's the compounding effect. This is also the reason why it's not 365% better, it's 37, based on the equation that was used to get it. It's actually not 1 plus 1 plus 1, which would make a lot more sense to us when we think about bettering ourselves by 1%. It's actually 1% of 1, which is 1.01. This idea has been around for a very long time. It's been used in many different areas like chess and manufacturing. The Japanese call this the Kaizen method, and Kaizen means change for the better, which comes from business and manufacturing. Breaking down each step of the manufacturing process to see how they can tweak it to increase better quality of production and reduce waste of time and just materials. It's a very detailed business. Enter a story that you will most likely hear in the self-development world, which is the British cycling team, Team Sky. Team Sky was not doing very good. They were on a losing streak for almost 45 years. They were a national embarrassment. Dave Balesford, who was a former cyclist and businessman, was hired to help improve the British cycling team performance in the early 2000s. The word on the street was that they were so bad, they even lost their bike sponsorship to one of the British cycling brands because they didn't want their customers linking the terrible performance of the bikers to the actual bikes and deterring them from buying those bikes. This might have just been a vicious internet rumor, but I'm gonna keep spreading it. So Balesford took over as a performance director, and because he was quite intrigued with the Kaizen method, he wanted to apply this theory on the biking team and see what he can do with them. So So they looked at every possible aspect of training that was required for the cyclists and looked at the smallest opportunities to make improvements that could boost the overall performance. Any aspect which could affect the cyclists was reviewed and improved in even the slightest way. Even if it wasn't directly related to training, things like proper hand washing technique to prevent the cyclists from getting sick as often, so they could have more training time was one of those things. More time training meant more time spending on improving. Then there were the more obvious training related aspects. They would get lighter tires to make them faster, different compression shorts, different helmets. They changed the pillows and mattresses that these guys slept on just to improve their quality of sleep to allow them to perform at their best. Bilsberg was convinced that this would lead to some wins. They tried out different cooling gels for their muscles to help them with recovery after training. They even dusted the bike spokes and cleaned the bikes frequently to make sure that the dust wasn't settling in the gears and making them less aerodynamic. I mean, this sounds pretty expensive for a team that was losing and probably didn't have that many sponsorships left to pay for all these upgrades. This, however, is a mystery for another day. At first, all of this seemed really silly, but then what started happening? After those small improvements in training, they went into their first race, and they lost. They still lost. Nothing changed on that front, but they were placing a little bit better. And they did more training and did more tweaks, and then we went into a second race, and they lost again. Still on a losing streak, but their rankings were going up now. Now, I don't know how many races they won or lost. I mean, I don't think that's really, here or there. But the point was, it was working. All these little changes were clearly doing something. So they continued down this track and wound up winning consecutive races of the Tour de France, and in the mid-2000s won Olympic gold medals as well. They had clearly figured out what was working. Who would have thought? From a never-ending losing streak to gold medals. I mean, it was unbelievable. It's a great love story, the story of the underdog. And don't we love the story of the underdog? This could be any and all of us. Whether you are familiar with that story, or maybe this was the first time that you're hearing it, either way, you're probably thinking, this is amazing, I can't believe it. But then you went about your life, except now this idea is creeping and taking over your mind 1% at a time. You're intoxicated with the thought that you too could make these minuscule improvements regularly and slay your life. Make yourself 1% better day by day to wind up 37% better by the end of the year. You think, I want to do that too. I mean, I haven't been a national embarrassment yet, so I think things are already looking up. And if that cycling team could come back from the huge setback where they started from, then surely you too could make some changes. Nothing was impossible but the limits that you were setting on yourself. So how can you slay the Olympic events and Tour de France's, which are your life, using this method? You're racking your brain and you're trying to how do I make myself 1% better? But eventually you realize that skinnier tires probably weren't going to make that much of a difference on your commute to work. And uncomfortably padded biking shorts weren't the type of fashion statement that you were looking to make. Is dusting your car rims really going to change the whole game? I mean, chances are probably not. So there you are, still infatuated with this idea and concept, but really no actual game plan of how to bring it to life. How do you quantify 1%? And how do you keep your eye on all of these improvements so that they don't slide backwards again? We saw that graph about the 1% worse every day, not liking those zeros that we're seeing there. Do I really need to start buying different pillows and mattresses or dusting my rims? I mean, it kind of sounds ridiculous, really time consuming, and let's face it, expensive. Would getting better equipment make you amazing just because you upgraded everything? I mean, I wish, but the answer is no. I've bought many a Nikes and I haven't gone pro in anything. Still got my regular job and I'm still just doing it. But here's the thing. When you are already at such a high performance level, any small tweak can be helpful. Shaving off seconds could be the difference between a win or a loss. Even that factory example I gave earlier about Japan, those factories were already working, probably just fine too. When they were looking to improve on something that already had a pretty solid operation. So as a regular person living a regular life, we're not actually playing on the same level as those professionals that are applying these methods. So what can we take away from that, and how can we make it actionable for us? So I've thought about this, and I have 5 takeaways for you. The first one is one-time changes. Let's examine the original story a little bit more here. Notice how a lot of the changes that were made were one-time changes. How many times did you need to buy a new pillow or a new set of tires? Once, maybe once in a while. This is a much more sustainable way to build the type of growth that you're looking to do. Don't just think, how can I be 1% better? Because whatever one-time idea you come up with most likely will have something to do with you, something you need to do yourself every day. You need to remind yourself to do it, and tomorrow you're gonna have to add something else to it. And now you got like 2 things you gotta deal with. By the end of the week, you're gonna be spinning way too many plates. That 1%, that's for today. Tomorrow is a new day. So how am I supposed to make all that work? Yes, changes can be incredibly tiny, but you still have to keep repeating them. So instead of think of it like this. What can I make once that's going to help me be a little bit better? These could be purchases, but they don't have to be. It could be something like, setting up an automatic withdrawal-free savings account so you don't forget to save some money. Get creative, ask yourself questions, and see how far you can get. The second one is a good foundation. This principle was applied on professionals, and I'm not saying that because you need to be a professional to do something with this, no. But these athletes being pro means that they already have taken care of all those foundational aspects. They already knew how to ride a bike. They already had pretty good diet. They already had gear that made them fairly aerodynamic. So unless you're already at that level where you have covered all of the basics and you're working on that edge, start with the foundational stuff first. Most of us regular folks still have a lot of opportunities to optimize the very basic stuff. And truthfully, unless you're at that higher level, you're not even going to notice a difference between making those tiny changes versus not making them. For example, focusing on something like what supplements you should be taking and which one is best, when the bulk of your diet could use some serious adjustment, is not the best place for you to direct your energy. Don't get all caught up in this romantic idea of making all these fractional changes and focusing on some top % behavior. Focus on the general, the easy to do, lower hanging behaviors first. Covering the basics first will set you up in a huge way. You're actually going to see much bigger improvements when you make those small changes to the foundational stuff than by focusing on those top % of activities. You need to build a good foundation in the first place to even build with all that extra stuff. The third one is actionable. It doesn't matter the size of the behavior or change. What matters is that it can be done today and that it can be repeated. All the changes were tiny and started with a tiny outcome, but they were repeated over and over, and that itself made them better. Shaving off 5 seconds in a practice run maybe doesn't mean much on its own, but repeatedly being able to shave off time or just improve your race adds up. And every time there'll be something more that you can do to contribute to the difference that you can make. Think tiny, and most importantly, think actionable. Think, what behavior is this? We get easily caught up in the ideas of this abstract thing, the idea of making myself better over time. What does that even mean? What does it mean? What does better mean in your eyes? How am I going to do this? What is the behavior that you can actually do today that can help you get to that place? The next one is no pressure. You are on your own timeline. The fantasy is to make a change today and then do something else tomorrow and so on. And that's great, but a lot of pressure is put on yourself. Really, there is no timeline or deadline. Take your time and pace yourself. Focus more on making a change and continuing with it than trying to stack more changes on top of one another because you feel like that there's a timeline you need to keep. It's better to have made a few small tweaks that you have maintained than try a bunch of things once and never do them again. Focus on quality versus quantity. The change compounds, it doesn't matter how slowly you are moving. And the last one is personal fit. See what's going to work for you and what isn't. There isn't going to be a perfect way for everybody. And just because something is supposed to lead to improvement doesn't mean that it will. And just because something doesn't maybe make any sense doesn't mean that it couldn't make sense for you. Now, personally, I definitely like this concept of making these small adjustments and reaping the benefits of those outcomes, but it's still a very active process. It requires you to go over even problems that you have already solved and asking yourself repeatedly whether there's something that you can do better. And my takeaway here is not to get too caught up in the details and focus on some high percentage behaviors, but really to focus on getting a good foundation going first. Making as many one-time changes as we can so we don't have to keep remembering every day to keep doing 10 different things. Make it small, make it actionable, and make it easy. The most important thing is to make it stick. It's better to move slow in the right direction than to not be moving at all. Let me know what you think about this concept and how you want to try apply this to your life. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe to this channel. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok, and I will see you next time.